The idea of swing, which developed somewhere between 1900 and 1915, has been an integral part of jazz ever since. Even today, if we talk about straight ahead playing, one of the key characteristics of straight ahead jazz is it has a swing feel to it. Throughout the history of jazz, however, there's been different types of swing, and I'm just going to demonstrate a few of these. What does it mean to not swing? Well, it means those ways that we break down the beat into those 2/8 notes, they're even. Sounds like this. Most classical music is even beat. Rock is even beat. Latin is an even swing, even 8th notes in there. So a lot of music does not swing. But when swing developed, in this period of time, we said around 1920, just before, it was the dominant form of popular music into the 1960s. All right, even early rock and roll usually swung before it, kind of changed a bit into having the even 8th note sounds. Early swing was interpreted in a lot of different ways by the players. One of the ways was a lot of emphasis, a lot of length on that first of the 8th notes, very little on the second one. It sounds somewhat like this. A lot of players didn't really like that. They felt it was too stiff sounding. It was kind of stilted. But it was just working things out. But a large number of players started to smooth that sound out. The most important being Louis Armstrong. One of his key contributions to the development of jazz was to smooth out that 8th note feel so that it just was a more flowing sound. This is the third representation that you have on in the course pack in the text that we have about this. So this is going to be still, the first 8th note is longer than the second. It's just not quite as long. That would be the early swing style at its mature level, late 1920s. It's that swing style, that interpretation of the swing beat that gets changed just a little bit and becomes part of the big swing craze. It begins around 1934 and 1935. With the bebop period, we have something new. And this is important because this new interpretation of the 8th note in the bebop style is what most people play today. Most jazz musicians today, if they play straight ahead style, don't play early jazz style and don't play the early swing style either. They play a bebop style. What does that mean? As the bebop tempo started getting faster and faster, it became very difficult to interpret the swing in the older way. If we're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It sounds almost as stilted at a faster tempo than the early swing styles. And so they wanted to smooth it out again. And when you smooth it out this time, it almost becomes even 8th notes if you graph it. Now the articulations are quite a bit different. It doesn't sound like fast classical music. It doesn't sound like Mozart. But the notes in some ways are being played in the same way that Mozart would play them. We just talk about length. And so a lot of the bebop players and beyond play, almost even 8th notes at the very fast tempos. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Those go very fast. Kind of sound like 16th notes, to tell you the truth, and sometimes we even interpret them that way. But in the jazz world, they're written as 8ths and pretty even 8ths. And that's the most recent reinterpretation of the 8th note that still swings. We're not talking about fusion jazz or Latin jazz where it's an even 8th note again. It still swings, but in a much more subtle way.